Good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and get moving. We got a lot of things we want to cover this morning. My name is Trisha Berry. I am our ecosystem lead, and you can see on the screen there what our ecosystem is all about. I think most of you are familiar with what we are doing with the STEM ecosystem. And thank you for joining us this morning for our STEM ecosystem corporate convening. What we are doing today is a variety of things. I'm going to start with just a quick update from the ecosystem on some things that we have had going on. And then I'm going to turn it over to Tracy Mendez, who is our corporate convening lead, and let her take it away from there as we talk about statewide broadband. And we have two guests with us, Jennifer Harris and Jennifer Bergland, who are going to share a bit from their perspectives. So we're looking forward to hearing more from them and how we as the ecosystem can get involved. We'll have some time for dialogue, learn what your thoughts are and where we can go as an ecosystem. And then we'll wrap up with some of the workforce data requirements and conversations that we've had in some of these previous corporate convenings, and then finish up with some of the next steps. We have a lot of things going on, so we're excited to share that with you and excited to get your feedback and hear a little bit more about your interests as we go along as well. Just a reminder about what some of our key programs are for the ecosystem. We are continuing to do our networking forums and these kind of community and corporate convenings to engage different stakeholders in our community. And we'll be setting the schedule for 2021 here in the super near future. So you can have those things on your calendar and be ready to join in. We also are continuing to do different, what we call amplifications. So when there are these STEM weeks or STEM things that are happening, we are trying to amplify those as we can throughout the STEM community and help lift up the things that STEM organizations throughout our community are engaged in. So we'll continue to do that as well. Some of the things that have happened most recently that we're excited to share with you, we did manage the summer to pull off an Ecosystem STEM Professional Development Day. STEM professional development had been something that's come up in our corporate convenings in the past as some place where the corporate community really could contribute. We did not do a good job, I would say, in this and engaging the corporate community. We threw this together, I kid you not, in probably 2 weeks time period, an amazing collaboration across our community of STEM professional development providers and people interested in that space who came together to make it happen. We ended up with 12 workshops that ran in 2 simultaneous Zoom sessions all day, and we averaged about 30 people all the way throughout the day, even through the 4 o'clock session, which was quite amazing. So we had great engagement from educators, lots of formal educators who were trying to get that last little bit of professional development in before the school year started. We had, again, such great success with this and such great energy around it. We definitely plan to do that again this coming year. But we definitely want that corporate engagement in our corporate convening. We had talked about if companies can come in and kind of share really what is, what does an engineer do? What does a scientist do at your company, and be able to provide some of those role models and some of that real world connections that would contribute greatly to that STEM professional development for our educators, informal educators, formal educators, to be able to then let them turn around and tell those stories to their kids that they are reaching. So we definitely want to engage you all and have that be a piece of that when we do this again. And we will have this being led by our STEM professional development providers action team. And so that's my next slide. I'm excited that we are finally getting these action teams launched. At our last networking forum, which is our community-wide event, we had breakouts on the different action teams, and we have people who are interested in joining in and making those happen. And really what we're looking for in those is a group of people who can come together and start to think about, in this space, so I'll use my personal interest one, Advancing Girls and Women in STEM action team, coming together to see what are we doing in this space, what are some things maybe we as a collective community of organizations and individuals interested in this particular topic. What can we come together on as a goal, as a common thread that we can advance further within our community? So we are excited to get those going. We're excited to have people who are interested in making those things happen. So expect to see an action agenda of what that might look like and more activity coming in 2021. So stay tuned. And if there's any of those that you have folks or you might want to get engaged with, do not hesitate to reach out, and we'll continue to share out when those opportunities are coming around in case you want to join in. So with that, that was my quick introduction and overview of things that we have had going on. I do not want to take more time unless we have any quick question that I can answer around those. And feel free to throw stuff in the chat as well, and I can answer there. Any quick questions?
Jennifer, while the questions come in, Jennifer, do you want to grab the screen and go to that slide on 2021 legislative? We'll do a process.
Oh,
all right, good morning, everybody, as we try to get that one set up. It's more of a slide to help you listen again to my rapid setup. We have, there we go, Yahoo, well done. Aren't we getting really good at Zoom these days? And aren't we especially glad to live in Austin, where 39 degrees is a rare commodity? That's what I had in Dripping Springs this morning. I'm like, OMG. Tracy Mendez. I am as I like to call it, a recovering corporate executive who has set my passion on STEM. My family thanks STEM dramatically that the attention's not on them. So let's go back to the corporate convening group that's met on several occasions, and the objectives that you have told us that to be part of this group. Thank you, perfect. Just the first one. Just set it on presentation, and then I'll click you through.
Yeah, when I'm clicking on presentation, it's deleting half the slide. So when I put it on presentation, half the slide is going away. I don't know.
That's by design.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay, sorry. I thought there was something wrong on my computer. I apologize.
No. This is a trip of trying to have anticipation and not too much junk on a slide. So
okay.
Perfect. So for our group, those of you who've come to the last couple of meetings, which were October and November, literally a year ago, you all said we care about STEM for two reasons, and in a good way. You do have corporations to run. Number one is we need a talent pipeline, and we prefer that talent pipeline be homegrown. And number two, our teachers need to have better professional development. So when the kids hit us, even though they've studied some version of STEM, they really are ready to go, whether this is, fresh out of high school all the way up to meeting, the community college and the college universities themselves. So that was the focus. So what I did is I went back and took a lens, and I've had Gabe and Patrick help me as well, part of the steering committee, to say what has our legislature done in the last sessions, and this is just a quick review, to help the local educators be better prepared to engage in STEM. So number one, they did a sweeping finance bill. The net was better teacher compensation. Still a lot to be done. If we want to have ex-professionals and second careers come back and help us, because you can't start an ex-professional at $30,000 a year, but that was great. Number two, and Jen will come back at some point in time, Jennifer Bergland, and talk about computer science. There's been a lot of good work done in more instruction and participation. You got to get somebody comfortable to go to a coding class rather than say, no, thank you. The other thing that was very specific to STEM was annual Texas Girl Days. But that was just really a date in the calendar. Hello, no, March, whatever it was, 29th, which was a Sunday. So there's a lot more we can do to support that legislator and their intent. Now, what happened, which was not on anybody's radar screen, or at least it surely wasn't mine, is Doc Anderson, who's a representative out of Waco, did a bill for a broadband office in the, PUC, Public Utility Commission, and trying to get investment. Well, that didn't go anywhere because everybody worried it was regulatory, but the governor did put together a broadband council, and most of the conversation today is what has happened with that, and Jennifer Harris is very, very knowledgeable and will walk us through it. Next hit, Jennifer. So, there we go. So just one, you can go back one because anyway, doesn't matter. So Winston Churchill, everybody uses it now, but never let a good crisis go to waste. It's the one biggest thing I walked out of my corporate career. And we have a crisis where everybody understands the difficulties of broadband. Even if you have, accessibility and you can afford whatever the plans are, it's not a perfect world when everybody came home and is clicking on, especially if you've got children. So what is it we can do today? The first thing that I want to offer, and this is what this conversation is about to our corporate community, is broadband has a whole lot of momentum now, a whole lot. And we as a corporate community and our steering committee members, so, the community itself, which is, all the providers, need to get behind this. And so we're going to start with Education 101, because we absolutely know for you as corporate representatives to go back to your leadership and say there's a bill evolving, the devil is in the dirty details. What does that look like? And we're a long way off, but we want to get everybody feeling comfortable what this is about. So next and last button. The exciting and really good news, and I made an error, it should be 80, not 88. 80 legislators wrote a letter to the governor in the middle of this September and said, we have got to do a state broadband plan. Okay, not regulatory, just a strategic directional plan to go forward. And the governor also just endorsed, let me get the right title, the one of our senators, Senator Cornyn, who did the digital divide slide at a federal, digital divide slide, I'm slided out, right? Digital divide bill at a federal level, and our governor has supported it. So while the governor hasn't responded to the legislators' letter at the moment, there is a lot of visibility, state, federal, et cetera. The other thing I don't want to get lost here, and it's just a quick side note, today is about broadband, getting everybody comfortable, thinking about how we will support, hopefully something that is very palatable to everybody on this call with broadband in the next legislative session. However, in the background, since that has momentum, we hopefully will go back to look at our STEM-specific priorities, which we think are still around professional development. Our teachers are desperate with the COVID issue. And number two, this whole concept of, they call it math sequencing and making algebra available in all our school systems in the middle school area. That's for a different conversation, but that will be hopefully policy or legislation that's more specific. But today, with a drum roll, very talented and very detailed, the Gen team, but Jennifer Harris is going to kick us off. And she's from Connected Nation and specifically leading the Texas effort. So thanks, Jen, for being here.
Thank you. And Tracy, I did update your slide. It was actually 88. So you had 80, but it was 88. So I wanted to make the number bigger. So I'm the one that made that change for you.
You know what? I thought it was 88. We went back and forth, and I'm glad the number grows. Let's hope it's every
I went and verified. I pulled the Texas Tribune article just to be sure, and it said 88. So I assumed that those folks can count, and so I used their number. So good morning, everyone. My Zoom is being, I don't know what's going on with it this morning. And so even when I'm touching the mouse, it's switching slides. So if it switches slides too early, I apologize. That seems to be, I'm going to maybe close the PowerPoint and bring it back up. I'm not sure what it's doing exactly. Okay, let's try this time. I wanted to just do a quick level set. I think we all, obviously, we know what internet is. We've all heard the term broadband, but I did not realize prior to doing broadband every single day, 24 hours a day, that broadband actually just means a speed. I knew it was high-speed internet, but that speed is actually defined. The Federal Communications Commission currently recognized definition for broadband is a 25 megabit per second download and a 3 megabit per second upload. Those same numbers are matched in state statute. So what the state of Texas considers unserved is if you don't have that 25/3 speed, same as what the federal government considers as unserved. So you could have internet in your home, but it not be considered broadband. The other thing I really like to highlight here is that broadband internet can come from a variety of technologies. Obviously, fiber is the backbone that gets all of these technologies, you know, the two to the door last mile connection to your home, but fiber is that backbone. But you can get broadband speeds through DSL, through cable, through fixed wireless, mobile broadband, satellite. But obviously at the moment, fiber has the most capability as far as fastest speeds. However, you can do a lot and probably everything you need to do with a lot of these other technologies. However, I like to point out on this slide that when we're talking about that 25, which is the minimum speed considered broadband, that really that's 3 to 5 devices supported. And that probably worked in most of our homes pre-COVID. We, might have been on our laptop watching something on Netflix. You've got your Nest thermostat, you're okay. But now you've got 2 parents working from home, potentially, multiple kids trying to go to school. You've still got your Nest thermostat, your smart TV, your Wi-Fi crock pot, all of these things, all of a sudden you're over that 3 to 5 really quickly. And that 25 may no longer be enough in a home, especially with that 3 upload speed matching that. If you're trying to do a lot of 2-way video calls, that speed may just not be quite enough anymore. We've not seen any change, obviously, during this COVID time on the speed. I would think eventually at some point that definition gets increased to a quicker speed of broadband, but at the moment that's where we're at. And the reason that's important is because federal funding is based on that number. So when you look at funds from the FCC or the USDA or other grant programs, it's based on that unserved number at that 25.3. Oftentimes, if it's not for specific purposes such as telehealth or education. And so that is why that number is critical, even if on a day-to-day basis now you and I don't think that's enough. It is what qualifies according to the government. One other thing that I like to always start out my presentations with is talking a little bit about terminology that's used on broadband, the difference between access, adoption, and use, that how we need to think about all 3 and that it's a holistic approach when we're looking at broadband. First, obviously, you have to have that physical access to broadband. If you don't have that physical access, you obviously cannot subscribe to broadband. And then once you subscribe, do you actually have the skills to know how to use broadband? Could you apply for a job online? Could you work remotely? Could you visit a doctor online? And that leads to the use category and the fact that many jobs moving forward require digital skills of some sort. And then everything else that we're doing in our daily lives. And then if we look at this in reverse and start with use, if you don't have those digital skills or a device, you're probably unlikely to subscribe in your home. And so we have, adoption there in the middle that kind of gets hit from both directions. You can't adopt if you don't have physical access, and then you're probably unlikely to adopt if you don't have the digital skills. Talking about access in Texas, I do like to point out that over 96% of homes in Texas do have that 25.3 connection. And if we stop there and just look at that number, we think everything is great. Texas has an A+. That's fantastic. 96% of homes have 25.3 broadband. However, that's where percentages can be misleading. It's one of those things about broadband that I've really discovered as I've dug into this topic, that we don't always need to look at percentages, especially in a state like Texas with such a large population. That remaining 4% of the population equates to over 300,000 households, almost 1 million people, the majority of whom reside in rural Texas. If you were to look at other state populations as I did, that would be like the entire state of South Dakota not having access to broadband. And so while 96% sounds good at first glance, that's an entire state's worth of people within our state that don't have broadband. So we're really not doing as good as it looks, but that number does get highlighted a lot. And so that's why I like to highlight it and then explain why we can't just stop by looking at a percentage. When we look at broadband adoption in Texas, however, things are a much worse picture, unfortunately. Over 30% of Texas homes, these are 2019 numbers, so pre-COVID, we're still not subscribing to broadband, which places us 35th among other states and territories in the United States. You can see that Texas is below the national average as far as adoption rate, and we're below Florida, we're below California, we're below New York, Pennsylvania, other states that I feel like we should be closer to, especially with all the technology and everything else going on in Texas. It seems so strange to me that we have such an adoption problem. And when we've talked about all of the students that haven't been able to go to school at home, and we say they don't have internet access, well, it's not necessarily that they don't have the physical access. It's this problem right here, that they're not adopting broadband in the home. One of the main reasons for that can be cost, but there are a lot of other barriers as well. As we talked about, those digital literacy skills, sometimes it's, you just made a choice. I mean, I don't have cable in my home. I have money to have cable TV in my home, but I've chosen not to do so because I'd rather spend that money elsewhere. And I think there's a lot of that going on in Texas, that choices are being made, even if the financial means are there. Because pre-COVID, if you needed the internet to check your child's grades or pay a bill, you could do that at work, at the office. And then when you came home, you were fine with your cell phone to check your email, get on Facebook, those types of things. But when we stopped going to the office or libraries or other places with that accessible Wi-Fi, I think that may have changed some opinions on whether having a home subscription, you know, is as important as they had realized before. So I'm really looking forward to the 2020 numbers to see how COVID has affected adoption in Texas. We have much more room to grow than other states. So I'm really interested to see how much that changes. Unfortunately, we won't have 2020 adoption rates until about mid-October of next year. So we have a long time to wait to see what happened during this year as far as broadband subscription. I'd like to point out on this slide that the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, another nonprofit that focuses primarily on broadband subscription and then as well as digital literacy, they do a ranking of communities with populations of 65,000 or more every year. There's over 600 of those across the country. And they rank cities based on broadband subscriptions. And if you look at the chart on the right, unfortunately, out of the entire United States, 4 of the top 5 cities that are the worst connected in the entire country are in the state of Texas. This is a direct reflection of that over 30% of Texans that aren't subscribing to broadband in their home and our 35th place ranking. You can see that based on these cities that it jumps from Brownsville to Beaumont to Odessa, that this adoption problem is not geographically specific. It really is a statewide problem. And we have low adoption rates everywhere. So because that's the case, it's definitely something, you know, we should really be thinking about as a state, because it's affecting all of our regions. It's not just an urban problem. It's not just a rural problem. It really is an everywhere Texas problem as far as subscription. However, as I stated before, we kind of get a double whammy in our rural areas, that not only do they have subscription issues, they also have access issues. And that's one of the factors there on why subscription is low in rural areas. But even when it is available, physically, subscription still matches the rest of the state. Wanted to talk a little bit about broadband policy in other states. The Pew Charitable Trusts has a whole broadband division, and they released a report in February. And as soon as I'm done presenting and we get to the questions, I'm happy to link to this report in the chat so that you can read it. But they did a report really looking at state level broadband policies. So not looking at those federal programs from the FCC or the USDA or the other agencies that put money toward broadband, but what states are actually doing. And they found 5 things that states that had successful broadband initiatives, you know, were really doing. Number 1 being stakeholder outreach and engagement. And I like to just highlight that stakeholders include, obviously, everyone on this call this morning. It includes communities, whether it's city councils or mayors or county judges, the health institutions in the community, schools, both K-12 and higher ed, the libraries, public safety, agriculture. Precision agriculture has become incredibly fantastic and cost saving these days. And most importantly, it does include the internet providers. The internet providers are the ones providing the service. So we obviously need to include them in any sort of public policy conversation that we have, and not just impose policy upon them without really considering them a strong stakeholder, as they are the provider of internet and the solution in the long run. This is PowerPoint 101. No to put this many words on a slide, but I'm happy to share these slides after this presentation so that you can read these more closely. They're from the Pew Report. I find them all very good words, and that's why I do have a slide on it, but just highlighting that stakeholder outreach, the policy framework, planning and capacity building, funding and operations, and then importantly, program evaluation, so that you can see that dollars being spent in your state are actually working. And then evolution as those dollars either are working or are not working in your state. One of the big things that states are currently doing, as Tracy mentioned, there was a bill in Texas to do this exact thing last legislative session that did not pass, focused on creating a state broadband office. Nearly 3/4 of the states either have a dedicated broadband office within an agency or have designated state agencies to be the collaborator and coordinator around broadband. So not regulatory, not mandate, not any of those things, but an office that really can be there is that neutral resource when a provider says, hey, I really want to go after these federal dollars. Is there a way we can do this in coordination with a certain community? Just having someone there to know, well, these providers are going after dollars in these parts of the state, and these providers are going after dollars in these parts of the state. Maybe if we combine that all together, that's a stronger sell for helping in Texas. So it's something that I think there will be legislation filed on again this upcoming session, really focusing on this coordinating but not regulatory broadband office. One of the other things that almost every state but Texas is doing is that they have a state broadband plan. You can see here, there are only 6 states that don't have a state broadband plan, Texas being one of them. All of the states that border us have state broadband plans. What is significant about a state broadband plan is that they follow those Pew promising practices that they discovered on broadband, that they define goals and objectives, the steps to achieve them. They help guide state investments if a state has a grant or loan program. They provide that baseline against which to measure progress. How can you know if the dollars you're spending are really doing any good if you're not collecting that data and measuring progress along the way? And more importantly, in a state like Texas, they provide a framework for local planning efforts so that we can look at things in a regional approach. And obviously a state broadband plan for Texas is very different than one for Rhode Island. We have a lot of regions, a lot of different things going on in our state. So being able to guide those local plans is really important. One of the reasons that states have these plans is that federal funding dollars are somewhat tied at times to these state broadband plans. Specifically, the USDA's Reconnect program. If a provider is applying for either a loan or grant or a loan grant combination from the USDA under this program, in a state, if that state has a state broadband plan, the provider gets bonus points on their application toward getting that loan or loan grant combination. So currently internet providers in Texas, when they're going after these Reconnect dollars from the USDA, they're being penalized those points that almost every other state is getting. There's going to be a lot of talk around the state broadband plan. On Tracy's slide, she mentioned the letter that went to Governor Abbott from the 88 legislators. It was asking for this exact thing, a state broadband plan. One of the other things that many states have done is have their own state broadband mapping programs. Currently, the way the Federal Communications Commission collects broadband data sounds good on the surface level. They ask broadband providers to provide the areas that they can serve and at what speeds every 6 months to the FCC. And that's about where it stops sounding good. Unfortunately, that data turnaround from the FCC occurs 12, 16, 18 months after the data has been collected by the FCC. So by the time that you and I see it, providers see it, decision makers see it, that data is really old. Another big problem with that data is that it's collected at the census block level. So if a provider can serve one home in a census block, the entire census block gets counted as served by the federal government and therefore ineligible for any of those federal programs. You can imagine in a state like Texas, where we have large census blocks, some even larger than the state of Rhode Island, how problematic that could be if you're counting an entire census block as served, if maybe there's 100 homes there and only one is really served, but all 100 show up and then are no longer eligible for funding. That's a huge problem. So many states have initiated their own broadband mapping programs to account for these factors and others, and use that data both for their own grant programs or loan programs that they have at the state level, and then to help providers when they're applying, for those federal funds, to show we have better data. We know that this area is actually unserved. They really should qualify, even though the federal data says that they don't. So these programs have proven to be a huge asset to have more granular data, more current data that's validated and communicated between parties, so that you really know it's a better picture of what's going on in the ground, and we really know the problem that we're trying to solve. There's a few current Texas broadband initiatives that were alluded to on Tracy's slide once again. The first is the Governor's Broadband Development Council that was created by the legislature last legislative session. I was honored to be appointed by Governor Abbott to this council in January and have been serving on this council this year. We've met, I guess, about half a dozen times. Unfortunately, they've all been virtual. We've not gotten to meet in person. I'm hoping someday it is safe enough for us to meet in person. But we've been meeting to discuss the duties as outlined in statute on this slide. And as you'll see, every year we are due to issue a report to the governor, lieutenant governor, and the legislature, not later than November 1st. Well, if you're looking at a calendar, November 1st is on Sunday. So you can expect for our report to be distributed this week. I think the goal was for it to come out today. I've not heard if that goal is going to be achieved, but I do believe it'll be by Friday, as November 1st is a Sunday. So our homework's going to be turned in just a little bit early. I'm happy to share this report with the group so that you can read it. It will also be posted. We have a web page within the Governor's Economic Development Office website. I can share that link in the chat as well. I believe the report will be posted there for public viewing. And then here's the part that I'd like to turn over to Jennifer Bergland to talk about. Operation Connectivity was a statewide initiative that started in May of 2020. And Jennifer Bergland served as one of the chairs of the working groups, the policy working group to be specific. So I'd love to let her talk about Operation Connectivity for just a little bit.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Just want to make sure, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. All right. I apologize that I'm not on camera, but I'm not in my home, so I'm in my car. So I had the privilege of being appointed to the Operation Connectivity Task Force, and I led the Public Policy Committee, and Jennifer was on my committee, and we met every week for at least 8 weeks in the summer. And then after that, my team continued to meet throughout August so that we could, because our job was to look at public policy to see, were there some policies that we could recommend that could be changed without legislation? And then also, what kind of legislation could we be looking at that could help solve this? Of course, our emphasis was on making sure that kids had access. And I will tell you that this has been this is not a problem that just cropped up with COVID. This has been something that my organization, which is a nonprofit association made up of close to 40,000 individuals who are interested in using technology in schools. In fact, computer science is a big part of what we have been working on and are supportive. And if you're wondering why this was something that broadband was something that Tracy thought would be of interest to this group, is because this is a barrier for students, particularly those that don't have access at home, to be able to really acquire the skills that are necessary in the STEM fields. And particularly in those areas that don't either have access, or, as Jennifer so eloquently made clear, that many students' homes may have the ability to get broadband, but either they can't afford it, or they're, for some reason, and there are a lot of reasons why they're not actually subscribing. Usually it's an affordability problem. And so this is something that we've been working on really since 2013, 2014. We had a broadband summit all the way back in 2014 to look at this, and the problems have not changed. The number one problem that we came up with in 2014 is that the state needs to help coordinate this, that there is not any one entity in the state that overlooks this issue and guides and directs it. We're not asking for regulation, but we're asking for coordination. And we've got duplication of efforts. We have DPS digging trenches so that they can do digital 911. We have school districts digging trenches so that they can bring broadband to their buildings. We have health facilities doing the same thing. And so we recognize that if there was some kind of coordination at the state, we could really tackle this. And we know that in that good Texas fashion, we could accomplish our goal. And so we gathered together, came up with some policies. They are, like I said, they're exactly what the Governor's Broadband Council is looking at. They are the things that the Pew Institute has identified. And so we very much are all in alignment of what needs to be done. But let me get very quickly, before I give it back to Jennifer and Tracy, just to let you know what Operation Connectivity has been working on. This is a slide from TEA that they just recently published. They, in July, were able to secure $200 million from the governor's CARES money, and they used that to help school districts purchase devices and hotspots, which is a temporary solution. It allows school districts to give a student a hotspot that they can take home and they can get broadband. It's not a permanent solution, but it is a stopgap measure. And the state was able to affect, I think, over 900 campuses. School districts were able to take advantage of this, what they called the bulk purchase campaign. And they were able to buy either keyboard enabled devices like an iPad or a Chromebook or some type of a laptop, and or a hotspot. I think that my memory is correct, they purchased around 890,000 devices. And that includes either a keyboard and a hotspot. So that's phase one, is to just help school districts get devices, because in the charge of the Operation Connectivity was not just to get broadband to the kids' homes, but it was to provide them with a device that they could access the broadband. And so that was the goal. And the goal is that every student in the state of Texas would have this capability by the end of 2022, I believe. And so what you have here on the slide is the timeline. We've almost finished phase 1. Phase 2, they're gearing up right now. In fact, they had a webinar yesterday with interested school districts, and what they're doing here is, and this helps with that adoption problem, they're working with telecom providers that know where they have access, and so they know where the telecom providers know the households that they could serve that they're not serving. And then the school districts have the capability of having where their children live. And so TEA is working on trying to put that data together to identify homes that have access, that have students in them, that do not currently have fixed internet. I mean, they're not subscribing to it. And so they're working again, looking for money. And I think they found maybe some CARES funding for this, that instead of the family subscribing, the school district would subscribe for them, of course, with their permission. But that's one of the problems is that sometimes the families don't want to put their credit card information out. It could be that they, for some reason, they just don't want to physically do that. And it could be for a variety of reasons. So instead of doing it from the parents' perspective, the school district would be paying for it directly with state dollars. So that's phase 2. Then phase 3 is where we figure out how to reach all of those homes that do not have access at all. And that they're already beginning to explore and working on that right now. So I will close with this one thing that a tech director told me. She is from ARP ISD in East Texas. She told me this in 2014 when I started working on trying to figure out how school districts could have broadband. She told me, she said, Jennifer, if you solve the problem at school, but you don't solve the problem at home, you've not solved the problem. And COVID has demonstrated that that is spot on. So thank you so much for giving Jennifer and I a chance to highlight the issues. I think it very much aligns with your goals. And so thank you very much. We've enjoyed working with Tracy, and I will turn it back over to you all.
Wow, great information. And I'll put one more point on that tech director. I saw at my ISD, it said bus drivers and cafeteria workers needed. And it said, please go on to the job application at this site. Well, the kid can't get on, and maybe the parent who would like that job can't get on either. So it's very critical. We can leave the next steps up, but what I wanted to do for a minute now is, and Trish, help me with the timeline, is number 1, see if anybody has any questions. The Jen duo really have this down pat as far as explaining it, and I know it helped my education because I'm not, my industry wasn't broadband or telco. And then 2, let's talk about, just generally speaking, and it can be whether it's our corporations on the phone and or our steering committee and other participants. Is this something that makes sense? And would your group, devil in the details, I get it, be possibly interested in supporting? So questions first, any questions?
Yeah, this is Richard. I have a, is the
Richard, anybody, when you go on, just say your name and say where you're from, because that will be a quick reference click to everybody.
Richard Togley from the Andy Roddick Foundation.
Perfect, thank you.
Is there, this is a great presentation, so thank you to both Jennifers. This is incredibly informative. Is there a plan, in addition to broadband and the actual devices is there a plan for training families in terms of how to monitor and help their children use the technology, primarily because we serve a lot of low income families in East Austin, and one of the challenges that they have was that there's so many platforms when their kids are able to access learning platforms, that there's so many, sometimes they don't understand which platforms they use. So is there some kind of a family training or orientation process that is going to be made available for families in addition to the technology itself?
I'll take a stab at that, and then Jennifer can talk about adoption in a broader sense. I know that many school districts are doing that, and they have created training programs for parents. I know that TEA has a very robust COVID website, and I would be surprised that if there's not some training information on there, but that right now that would be a local district process. But I will tell you, from serving tech directors, that's part of what we do. Many of them have been sharing different training processes, but you've hit it on the nail, and that you've hit the nail on the head. Sorry, that training is very much a part of it, and that's part of the adoption problem. And so, Jennifer, I don't know if you want to go into more about what you all are doing or seeing in that respect.
So I'll say first, from the Governor's Broadband Council perspective, we are focused on the access piece and that unserved population, not on the adoption piece. So there won't be at this time, unless the legislature changes our duties, to truly focus on that piece. I would hope, as the council, grows as the issue grows in Texas, that becomes one of our charges. From a Connected Nation perspective, we do a lot of things in that space, not necessarily directly with students and parents and that type of thing, but we have a program inside Connected Nation called Digital Works, where we actually do digital training, and I'll post a link to that in just a second as well, so that you can read about that program, but where we train folks to actually be able to have that online job. It's a program that we've done in several states, and I'd love to see it in Texas at some point. It's currently doing very well. I think we've had our 1,000th job hire happened during the pandemic, which is really pretty cool, that we're getting folks jobs during the pandemic that showed up with no digital skills, and now they're able to work from home safely. I'd like to point out that the Texas Workforce Commission has opened up, I believe it's about 6,000 classes, digital skills classes. I do believe they're all online. So obviously, if you don't have a broadband subscription in your home, those may be a challenge to access right now. But there are a bunch of free classes that the Texas Workforce Commission has opened up, everything from Microsoft Word to, you name it. 6,000 classes is a lot of training that is free for Texans right now to sign up for. So that's pretty exciting. And then I'd like to highlight something that the Boys and Girls Clubs actually do. I speak with the Texas Alliance of Boys and Girls Clubs a lot. Their director is one of my friends, so she and I communicate all the time. But they focus on that piece, Richard, that you were specifically mentioning, on students. Some of this is pre-COVID, but when students would come to them after school for their programs, their parents had no idea that a child shouldn't have, a fifth grader shouldn't have 1,000 Facebook friends. There were parents that didn't realize that that was problematic, that when you're in fifth grade, you probably don't know 1,000 people. And so they had a lot of programs at their local club level to help train parents on those specific things, on what are safe behaviors on the internet, here's how you actually know what your child is doing on the internet, that it really is school or educational related, or, appropriately entertainment related. Entertainment's great online too, as long as it's, at that appropriate age level. So I do know that we have organizations, like I said, like the Boys and Girls Clubs, who are focused specifically on that student parent topic and making sure that that training piece is there.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'd love to get some discussion.
Yes, I have a question.
Welcome, Kat.
Thanks. This is Kathy Jones with Austin Partners in Education, and I apologize if this is a simple question, but a lot of our students are issued hotspots from the district. But I'm just curious, what happens with the hotspot? Does it run out of data or memory, or what happens? Because sometimes what we're learning is their hotspots aren't working, and I don't know if we need to help the kids get those exchanged or reloaded, or how that works.
I'll attempt to answer that. It probably depends on it depends on what kind of contract they have with the provider. Some of them have a data cap. And so if the kids are going home and taking those and they're watching Netflix and they're doing lots of other things on there other than their typical schoolwork, they may have hit to that data cap and it's cut off. The hotspots that came from Operation Connectivity had no data caps. And so it may depend on the type of hotspot that they have and what the contract was with that particular provider. So I would contact the school district and let them know, and they could probably help solve that problem.
Okay, so I think that is what it is. They're hitting a data cap. Does it reload monthly, or that depends on what the district purchased?
It reloads monthly.
Okay.
And and probably that might be something that's a learning curve. If the school district doesn't have an unlimited, which would, if they didn't buy it through Operation Connectivity, in fact, many school districts had already bought a bunch of hotspots prior to Operation Connectivity, giving them this mass, this opportunity to buy them in mass, which greatly lowered the cost and you got a better deal. But, it teaches students that if you consume it all in the beginning of the month, you're going to run out. I know that some school districts, they're set to where they can't use some of those applications that hog the internet. And so it may be something that the school district could work with the provider to block those types of applications as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was very helpful.
You're welcome.
Any other questions before we just have maybe a quick round robin of overall general support as this moves forward? Man, ladies, I can't say man, ladies. Boy, oh boy, ladies, you've done an amazing job. There's no more questions at this moment. I don't think there's anything else in the chat. And I see Jennifer has put a couple things in the chat as well. Oh, good. I don't know how to do what you did, Richard, but I see a thumbs up. So you can tell I'm pretty passionate. I come from a background that says, what's the one thing we have to do? And I know there's 100 things that we've touched on, and depending on what your personal / professional priority, it may still be some other area we have to get to. Like Richard said, okay, great. How do we get the parents trained? But this seems to be the one easy thing, if it continues to have traction, that is step number one in a long trajectory of things to get done. I know I personally don't know how to do the thumbs up. Is there a general consensus, or are there people who have some concerns? And I'd love to hear those as well.
Hey everybody, this is Shelly with IBM Corporate Social Responsibility. So I'm just sort of listening and brainstorming. I also apologize for all the chirping in the background. I have parrots. They have a lot to say in the morning. So just curious, like how we can assist. We tried to sort of help by offering task forces to think through how we could provide service to students, particularly in the Austin area, early on in the school shutdown. But of course, schools were just overwhelmed and weren't really even ready to receive help at that point. So it sounds to me like we need some updated legislation around the fact that we have these companies that are missing out on these credits. Like, what can a company do at a legislative level that might assist?
Thank you, and drum roll. Somewhere, I guess, Trish, do you want to put up my last slide and I'll kind of tell you where we are? Because there have been several draft bills, and please, Jennifer's, jump in because this is quite evolving, but there are some draft bills that have been filed, very premature. There we go. So what we're going to be doing is continuing to inform this group and hopefully a broader group of not everybody who's on the STEM. And, you know, if there's other corporations, you know, that maybe aren't on the STEM ecosystem today, we still want to get all in. I guess my analogy would be, this is a highway we all have to build together. It doesn't matter where you want to get off on that highway, whether it's for telemed or STEM or economic development. But if we don't build this highway together, which looks like some kind of non-regulatory office with a plan that really starts sharing information, so we don't have the haves and have-nots just because of lack of knowledge, but also, you know, the resources. So right now in this, I'll close out with this, but I'm still happy to hear, and we still have, I don't know, almost 10 minutes still of any more feedback. The things we're going to do next inside of the ecosystem is we need the corporations and anybody, actually anybody on this call, to discuss potential support, not only in Greater Austin, which is who we represent, but in Texas. And please do be aware, I'm working with the TEA ecosystem, that's Michelle Sedberry. She's very supportive. And also the Alamo, which is San Antonio. And we hope to, in the process of drafting a letter on behalf of all three ecosystems to say that we buy into the 88 legislators letter to the governor. So that would be, if you can go back to your organization and be able to give us a thumbs up. And as we write this letter back and any other places for comment, that you and your organization can be one more voice to build the highway, that would be thing, Sherry. I'm gonna pass number 2 for the moment. We will be continuing to share with you, hopefully in November, more data, and Trish is going to go into that in a minute on, you know, how do we provide the right amount of data? So numbers like the 96% access, I think that was right, that Jennifer shared earlier, does not send everybody off thinking the world is good when it's not good. I have down there, share the reports of the governor's broadband. Jennifer is putting up notes on the chat on what that, you know, how to access that. That will be out this week. If you want to please read it and share it within your own organization, as well as Jennifer Harris. When is operational connectivity? I apologize if I did not hear this when you chatted. Is there something formal coming out? I think it's each year, right? Oh, no.
That's a Jennifer Bergland question.
I'm sorry, Jennifer Bergland. Sorry, it is Jennifer Bergland. And it was the broadband comes out annually, but operational connectivity, is there some report we will get to see with policy or legislative?
TEA will be coming out with, they're the ones that are driving the information. Of course, they can't come up. TEA is not going to propose legislation.
No,
that is not something that they can legally do. However, they may advise and tell legislators what they think is important. We are definitely building a coalition of interested groups that, however, does want to propose legislation. And again, it's very much in line with what we've been talking about: broadband, some type of coordinated effort, broadband plan. We've got to figure out some funding for this. So very much in line with the things that the governor's Broadband Development Council hopefully is going to be suggesting in their plan that's coming out hopefully the next couple of days. I'm excited, Jennifer, to read it. I can't wait to see what you all have been doing.
It will hopefully be the treat, not the trick at the end of the week, right? So Sherry, I think this is a laundry list. We'll continue to keep everybody informed, and we'll continue to ask you to be able to nod your head yes and be vocal with your leadership in the support. So I think, Ben, you're with Deloitte, and then we've got Julie. Oh, Julie, you've been at Samsung. I apologize. You are now with, no, Julie's going to try to come.
She's with National Instruments. She had to hop off already.
You know, for you guys who are in the corporate world, that you go up your leadership ranks to be able to say, when the time comes, is there a senior player that could speak to whoever's appropriate, the governor, their legislator, to other corporate leaders in the area as well. So the two things highlighted in black are that, you know, number one, we need your corporation and any of our profits and nonprofits on the phone to be willing to share their voice on that topic. Any other questions?
And I just threw in the chat, I think that's, you know, somewhat of what we're hoping with the power of the ecosystem and what the ecosystem is really all about, right? Connecting the dots and trying to provide perhaps some of that information or the content, or pointing people in the direction of these things that can help advance STEM learning across our community, the STEM workforce that we've talked about in numerous meetings. And so we will share out information. We will, you know, try to help provide those connection points, suggested wording, suggested points of contact, whatever that may be as we move forward in this space. Because we know it's critical to the work that we all are doing at all levels of the pipeline. I see how it affects my work at the university. We see how it affects the K-12 spaces and how it's impacting our parents and families who are working from home, all of that. You want me to talk a minute about that second bullet there, Tracy?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
I could talk about the last item we have on the call.
Yeah, so we don't have a whole lot of information on this to share with you other than to be on the lookout. The TEA has currently available for public comment the new high school science standards, the TEKS, that are including STEM for the first time. The state of Texas is the only state, from what I understand, that does not have STEM as a concept, as a theme embedded in their state standards. So we are behind every other state in the country when it comes to engaging our kids with the concept of STEM. Science standards are up for review and revision right now. And so this is the first place that they have embedded STEM. Doesn't mean it won't come in other spaces as we move forward and as other things like math come into the revisions, but right now it's science. So the high school science standards are up now. The middle school, elementary school science standards will be coming soon, and STEM will be embedded in them as well. This is the time for public comment. So what they're looking for are people like us to go in, and I will make sure in our follow-ups that we point you to where all this is and what it means, because TEKS can be confusing. But they're embedding things like the engineering design process. The word engineering's never been in the TEKS, and so it will now be included in the high school standards, and then again, as they start to move down into the lower grades. So as you might imagine on things like this, the negative voices, the no voices, get a lot of attention and tend to show up at things. So we want to make sure there's lots of positive comments about why STEM should be in these standards and why it's amazing that these things are happening. So if you're on board with including STEM in the standards, please go in and provide those public comments. So again, we'll point you to where that is and how to do that in our follow-ups, but super important, and we'll give you the deadlines, and we'll continue to share that information out as those other TEKs for other grades come about.
And if I can just build 2 seconds, what I think we're going to try to do is not only point you exactly where to find it, but give you a elevator speech that you're welcome to tweak, but to make it really easy. Copy, click, paste, one more word of support. And that's great if it's from, I think, Zarella, you're with IBM or Deloitte, all of those extra, impacts. Because crazy as it sounds, like Trish said, we may have naysayers, even though, it makes absolutely no sense based on commercial interests that they find, that wording will not align to how our educational system may be supporting their particular profits.
And then just one note on our November gathering. We'll make sure that that's included in our follow-up as well as we set the date for that and get that confirmed. But we have wanted for a while to bring in folks to share a little bit more of the data. We know E3 Alliance has some amazing data. They've shared that more recently about some of the STEM pathways. They've gone in and really helped disaggregate the data by gender and ethnicity, so you can really see what's happening with our students in the STEM spaces across Central Texas. And so we want to try to get them to come in. We know the Chamber has some updated data. We have a lot of data that's in different spaces. So we want to try to bring that in November to be able to, again, kind of level set and get everyone on the same page on some of these things as we move forward. So stay tuned for that. And as always, we will record these. That's the beauty of Zoom. We'll record them. So if you can't make it live, we'll share that out. We'll share out the presentations afterwards. And make sure to keep you connected best we can. Questions, concerns, ideas, thumbs ups. I have to teach, I see it, Richard's thumbs up. I have to teach Tracy how to do reactions. Okay, thanks, Zarella. All right, Tracy. Oops, that was our last slide.
Okay, so we covered this slide. If that's all you're going to share about right now, the data collection, that's a meeting we hope to have in November, and that will be more granular to STEM. And so I'll be on the lookout. And Jennifer, a million thanks. I know this has been, I think the silence is fabulous in how great this information was and educational. I even said to Jennifer, I'm not sure I know what, 25, did I get that right? Yeah, 25.3 is. And I learned upload, download, all simple things, unserved, underserved. So Jennifer, as we continue to build, our partners, I'm hoping that we might sweet talk you one of those presentations